That one's working. This one's working.
This one doesn't.
We have a dud every meeting, it seems like.
This one's on.
All right. There we go.
The time is 6:04 p.m. on this Thursday, December 7th. Welcome to the Mountain View Western School District Board of Trustees regular meeting. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Jose Gutierrez Jr.
Greg Coladonato.
Laura Blakely.
Tamara Wilson. Ellen Wheeler.
Thank you, trustees. And now we move on to approval of the agenda. For the consent agenda, I'd like to pull item E, actually pull item G and add that as item E under review and action.
Item what?
E under
E,
review and
Crittenden
action.
Middle School book discard.
No.
You
No.
said G the second
G.
time, right?
G as in,
Finding of board concerning absence of trustee Ellen Wheeler. That one?
okay,
Yeah.
so why is that going out of consent?
Because in the resolution, it says that we discussed it and we agreed and we haven't.
Okay,
So I want to go through the process just for the process sake.
okay.
Thank you very much. Anything else, trustees?
No. Move to approve the agenda.
Second,
Motion is moved by.
Wait, did you already make a motion with that change?
See, as
Well, I thought,
revised.
yeah.
Second.
So as revised, great. and
Second.
So moved by trustee Gutierrez, seconded by trustee Caldonado. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Opportunity for members of the public to address the board concerning items in the closed session agenda. Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak to those issues? Seeing that there are none, we will now move on to closed session at, yeah, I know, at 6:06 p.m. Thank you, trustees.
Pull it during consent.
Oh, I didn't, I checked with Rudy, that's fine, but thank you.
It's cold in there. I should bring my coat.
Can't hurt.
Yeah.
Want to write something?
The time is 6:35 PM. We will now reconvene our meeting of the Mount Westminster School District Board of Trustees. In terms of closed session, there is nothing to report.
So I move that we move item 10B, California School Boards Association Annual Conference, sharing up to now so that the rest of the meeting is more in line with posted start times.
Second.
Moved by Madam Wheeler, seconded by Honorable Caldonado. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, trustees. We will now move on to the California School Boards Association Annual Conference sharing. Who would like to begin?
I could do that.
Very well.
All
Board.
right, so, I wrote up a little report and I said that what I did is I utilized the things that I had typed up before the meeting so that I didn't have to add a lot to it. But, and if any member of the public would like my report, I'm happy to send it to you or I could give it to Kathy. Anyway, one of the things that was useful to me was seeing that there are some like evergreen agenda items that are at every conference. And it's useful to go to those, like there's a finance one that's given by the legislative analyst. There's a legal symposium given by lawyers. And, you know, each of those issue items are different every year. So it's worthwhile, you know, trying to go to those ones every year. So I did those. One new one that I went to it was a brand new session. Is some lawyers from Dennis Walliver and Kelly did a workshop on something called the leaves matrix, and leaves refers to personnel leaves, not leaves on a tree. So, and one thing that CSBA did different this year is they posted most of their presentations online. So anybody can go online to their website and see the presentations that were done at many of these workshops. So I recommend to all of you that you go to this Leaves Matrix workshop and look at their PowerPoint, because it's very well organized with lots of good detail and lots of good information. So, you know, we don't have to be experts on it. Dr. Brudoff and, you know, our personnel people have to be experts on it, but it's good for us to understand the generalities of this. So I would recommend that. The other thing I want to say is I wrote up a long report about critical legal issues, and I don't want to read the whole report aloud because I don't want to take up everybody's time. But I sent my report out to the board, and I encourage you to read just the short, you know, fairly short description of hot legal issues that have arisen over the last year.
Who's next?
I'll go.
Go for it.
I'll just, instead of reporting on the individual sessions I went to, I actually went the day before it started. There was a new trustee workshop, which was a day-long workshop. I couldn't attend last year. I ran out of leave at work or vacation time. So I went this year though, and it was very useful. It was nice to see some of the people I had already met at my first master's in governance class and reconnect with them, and just really kind of, they were reiterating some of the ideas that we had already learned and about at the MIG class, but it was a really good refresher for me. I attended a really interesting session on the closing the achievement gap in Sacramento County. And what this sparked for me was an interest in hopefully our district wanting to possibly present RTI and our successes with that maybe in a year or two. But not to bring work back, but I thought this is really exciting what we're doing. I don't know how many people know about it.
You talking about as a,
as
presented as a
session.
workshop?
Yeah,
Yeah.
workshop or a session. I just think we're having a lot of success with it, and it'd be fun to share. So
Mhm.
sorry if I'm bringing work to the table, but what they were doing got me thinking. Like, hey, we should be sharing what we're doing and our successes. The talk by Wes Moore. I don't think any of us could get through this and not bring that up. It was an incredibly insightful talk, and I think it really highlights the need to remember that we all probably battle with thinking of people as us and others, and we're all people. And the other Wes Moore is really about opportunity and people believing in you and others. And it was just very powerful. I haven't gotten my hands on the book yet, but we all get a copy soon. And of course, the gubernatorial candidate forum. I think we forget, as I learned in Masters in Governance, maybe an obvious fact is school board members are the largest number of elected officials in the country. And for gubernatorial candidates to come and present to them is a really great opportunity for us to see what their ideas are and to even just to share in our own communities. So I'll just end there.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to go next. I ended up going to a number of sessions that more focused on governance and board and superintendent relationships and the power of collective will. And my goal there was, I feel like I think I said at our last meeting that we've made a lot of progress as a board during this past year, but I feel like, I want to be that highly performing board that's really smoothly operating together. And so I was hoping to glean some insight there. And a lot of them sort of said the same thing. So maybe I should have branched out a little bit more, but I did get some good tips at those. One of the things they talked about is revisiting the board protocols annually and getting everybody to buy in, and whether you modify them or just readopt them, you talk about them. And we may have done that last year, but I was a brand new board member and some of it was like drinking out of the fire hose. So it may have washed over me, and I want to be more conscious about that this year. They also had some ideas about how the agendas get developed for board meetings, that in some school districts, they'll have the president work with the superintendent and also either include the vice president in those meetings or have a rotating board member so that every, fourth meeting, another board member helps participate in that process. And I was intrigued by that and would like to discuss that when we have our next retreat, because it just seemed like it might be helpful to kind of bring people in. And again, that may have been partly because I was a new board member and a little bit out of the loop. And I know, Tamara, you felt that way a little too. Sometimes there's a learning curve. So I thought that was really helpful. They also talked about board self-evaluation, and we did do one of those this year. But I think it would be helpful to get our board just really working together. So that was kind of my focus for that. I also really enjoyed both the Wes Moore talk and the gubernatorial candidates. I was really impressed by the gubernatorial candidates overall. There were, one or two that maybe I was less impressed with, but it's nice to know that we live in a state that has a lot of really good people running for office with compelling ideas and who seem to really genuinely care. So that was heartening.
Laura, did you attend a workshop as well?
Yes, I did. I went to the board president's workshop.
How was that? What'd you learn there?
It was good. It was a lot about, governance and, some of these same things about pulling the board together and working closely with the superintendent and engendering goodwill. I mean, some of these sessions that I went to, when one guy raised his hand and had his horror story with his board, and, I suggest they had some ideas for him, and I pulled him up later and I said, hey, you might just try breaking bread. And he and some other people, other board members that I heard, they said, we can do that? We can all meet and have dinner together? And I'm like, yeah, you just can't talk about matters that are coming before the board. Like when we met last year, we invited our families and, talked about kids and vacations and interests and that sort of thing. And I'd like to do more of that. I think it will help us operate better as a board, and not just better as a board, but one other point that I should have emphasized was that the one commonality that these experts at these various sessions said that every high performing school district has, or high achieving school district, is they have a board that works well together. And that was like the one kind of least common denominator, greatest common denominator, sorry. And so, just to achieve the goals that we have in our strategic plan, that'll be helpful for everybody in the district, including, most importantly, all of our students.
For sure. Thank you. I really like the gubernatorial presentation. It was fun to see them sniping at each other and answering or not answering questions, as as politicians do. I also like the pure politics, kind of like similar to that one, the pure politics presentation, which I try to go to every year as well. The thing I liked most about the trip was a chance to break bread. We had lunches. We had 2 different lunches, a dinner, a Stanford game, and pool playing,
Or a
billiards
USC
playing.
game, if you.
Laura calls it the USC game, and I respect that. And so, but the MVLA board definitely considers it a Stanford game. And so a lot of time just kind of unwinding and connecting to people like humans as opposed to elected officials, which is not the same thing, And so that's why I like to go. I know that in prior years, a trustee said, "Oh, that one's not worth going to, that conference." But I think that misses out on the fact that if somebody didn't go to this, there'd be a partial team there having lunch, having dinner, meeting with MBLA and doing this stuff. Not a whole team. So I'm glad everybody goes, and I enjoyed it. Sir?
Did you attend any workshops?
Yeah, the pure politics one is a workshop. And I liked I went to one about running campaigns. I was invited to that, I guess. Maybe you guys were invited as well. A Los Altos School District trustee was one of the presenters, and I went to that, and I thought he gave an excellent presentation. And he was presenting on Voter Circle, which we use for Measure B. And then I actually missed some of the other workshops because I had work calls to call into from San Diego, sadly. But anyways, I got most of what I hoped to get out of the event by going and hanging out with people.
Oh, that's great. No, that's good. So when I went 2 years ago after I had been appointed to San Diego, and I had talked to Trustee Wheeler, and we had spoken briefly, and then I looked around the convention center, and I bumped into a couple of friends, right, who had been mentoring me. They were both the board presidents at the time. For their own school boards. And then I saw how they were interacting with their fellow trustees. And then I'd see them with the gas lamp, and they would have dinner, or they would have lunch, or they'd go get coffee. And it wasn't just the trustees, but it was the trustees plus the superintendent. And I had mentioned to Ellen, man, I wish one day, well, I didn't say man, but man and Wheeler, I wish one day we could have a board that could do that could have a lunch, that could, have a dinner, and we can act as a team and begin to take the district to the next level. And lo and behold, 2 years later, this very team had the chance to do that on several occasions, right? And we saw the benefit of that, and it's a good benefit because I think that once you lower the guard a little bit, you start to realize we're all human beings. We just have a different approach on how we look at the painting, and it's a different viewpoint. It's not wrong or right. It's just when you add in the collective opinions of the 5, then you get a brand new interpretation of what that painting means. So I appreciated that the most out of the weekend because I think it can only get better, right? And it will, and it'll help us to bridge the gap in communication. The workshops I attended, though, mostly dealt with LCAP and LCFF issues, either with negotiations and bringing that into the community, and also explaining to the community, what does this mean? And what's your say in this process? Because you do have a say. There was one presentation that struck me a little bit because they had a different perspective on how to negotiate the money for what you would tap into in terms of a raise, which is very different. I don't know that I would do that, but I think what I'll do is I'll maybe send an email out to the team about the explanation to it because I have more detailed notes at home. But the gist of it is that instead of what they're using is the hypothetical and not assuming that they're going to get X amount of money from revenues from taxes, property taxes. And based on that, they would tap into the reserve to ask for a 1% or a 2% raise. And then based on that, they would then go into the property taxes and then supplement. That was interesting to me because I hadn't heard of that approach before. The way they explained it, it seems like it works for them, but I don't think it would work for us. But just to have that approach be explained at that level was refreshing because it's something different, right? But what I did like was that they were able to share more with the community in terms of collective bargaining. What are the issues revolving that? And oh, by the way, parents, if you want to have the day length of day extended, that's a contract issue with the teachers that we have to negotiate. And then at that time, they picked up on it, and then they became more vocal and said, yes, we do want this to be an option. How can we get this happening? And they started having the conversations about that. So that was interesting to me too, that they were able to get that buy-in from the community. And then superintendent contract issues, I went to those sessions as well in terms of how do you better improve the contract? How do you better improve the relationship with the superintendent at that time with said contract? Or what is there in that contract that can help you and the district achieve even greater heights, right? Where everyone feels like they're a successful winner in that process. Not just the district, but the board as well as the superintendent. And by having that type of positive relationship, what does that mean to the district as a whole? And where could that take you from one year to the next? And then the one that struck me the most, I think, was the presentation on when national news hits your community. So in this case, it was the DACA presentation. The Pittsburgh Unified School District looked at the same issues that we did as well with DACA. But what they did is not only did they have the board address that issue, but the superintendent also addressed that issue with the teachers and the principals. And they had informational nights with the parents at each said school. Once the resolution was worked on between both board members, the school district, and community members, then it was presented to the board, it was discussed, passed. Once that was passed, then they took it to the next step, which was to have that presentation, no, to have that resolution of both DACA and some other issue, I forgot which one, the safe haven, I think. What they did is that they printed out both. And they went to each school site and they posted it up on the wall so that all the Latino speaking people could read it in English and in Spanish. It was available to both groups at each school site. And once they had that done, they followed up with meetings in terms of, in case you're interested, kind of like what Santa Clara Unified did and what Lisa's is wanting to do, they posted on their website as well. These are events from the community that you're interested in, where you can then speak or gain more information about said issues, and here's where you can go. And they made that available on their website. But then also at their school sites, they had a flyer that would have that listed out so that if someone wanted to look at it in hard writing, in hard copy, they could get that unless they had access to the internet. So I think in the end, what that told me is each district is unique in and of itself, but the way that you interact on the board and the way you interact with the executive team, along with the superintendent and the principals and the community and the teachers, when you add all that up, depending on the subject matter, you have a pretty powerful voice, right? And you also have a pretty powerful approach on how you problem solve. And then for that matter, how you look at the future, because you don't know what issues may come up in the future. And when you have insight as to how that works in some other districts, you have a greater appreciation of what you've done, but also what you can do different. And by doing that different, how you can be better in that way, right? So that's why I value this conference, because it gives us a chance to be able to figure out how do other districts do these types of things or other issues? How do they see it? What are their opinions on it? How big is the district? Are they comparable to us or not? Can we use these ideas? And for that matter, can we implement them later on and just do a caveat of some sort, right? To make it even that much more better. So I want to thank everyone for having attended the conference and for having attended the luncheons and the get-togethers that way, and also with the Mountain View Los Altos High School District trustees. When you do that and you extend out that way, I think it just makes us stronger within Mountain View itself. And I think the parents should be proud that you have two functioning boards where, in our case, we can agree to disagree respectfully without any aggression of some sort. And we always push it forward, right? We always keep going forward, and we always keep making these decisions for the better interests of our children, of our students. And that's, in 2 years, we've come a long way. So I want to thank all of you for sharing. Does anyone else have any comments? Closing comments.
Well, I think Dr. Rudolph could give his report.
Done.
Oh, I think the thing I would echo outside of some of the sessions is, the first year I was here, only a couple of us went to San Diego. The second year I was here, I had my appendix taken out.
Mhm.
Right.
I can trade you mine.
No,
Uh-oh, they're all out.
they're all out.
Oh, yeah, they're all.
All right. Well, I'll just talk up, and then if it comes back on. But I think the biggest thing was just the fact that all 6 of us were able to have some camaraderie. I think all of us were moved by Westmore. I thought it was really interesting to listen to the different gubernatorial candidates. And it was great going to different sessions. I went into one that talked about, although it seemed like they were trying to sell something with another company that they were working with, but it was about how do you get a partnership. And of course, it was a company that they happened to work with who did a partnership. It was a real interesting take on that. But I think the biggest thing was just it was great to see the 6 of us just sort of enjoy each other's company, and then also to collaborate and have lunch with the high school district. And that's the first time that's happened since I've been here. So it was a really good moment. So
Yeah, thank you for setting that up, Tamara.
Yeah, no problem. And we actually got together a second time unprompted with the high school district. So
yeah,
It-
yeah,
it
that's
paid it
right.
forward.
When we watched
the
we
game.
watched the game, even though
Yeah.
Ohio State didn't make it
So
into
we
the
actually like it.
the
Ohio
championship.
State.
Well, we were hoping for chaos, right? So after Stanford lost, the idea was that Ohio State would win, and then we just have bedlam for the
Mm.
college football playoff. And Ohio State won, but they didn't get selected. So, but it was good. It was real good. So I think that was the biggest takeaway. Outside of most of this stuff is stuff that we get to hear constantly, and it's always a good refresher. But I think the most important part is just like what Laura was talking about, just the breaking bread and the enjoying and being able to discuss just different things and talk and see each other in a different light.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. Trustees, anything else? No? And yes, I want to echo Greg's sentiment. Thank you so much, Madam Wilson. I mean, having this opportunity to interact with MVLA, that's great. That was a
Yeah.
good idea.
Priceless.
Fun.
Yeah, and hopefully we can make it into a tradition that way, right?
Yes. Karaoke is next time.
Did you invite any other neighboring districts to that lunch that just didn't come?
I didn't. I could have.
Oh,
I
okay, we didn't. We
Yeah,
didn't, okay.
I didn't. You know why? Didn't know them. We had that event here at Graham, and
Mhm.
I can't recall.
Yeah,
It's a
the
countywide-
county's
Excuse
school
me.
board's dinner.
Yeah, and I hadn't. And I should have introduced myself to
okay.
others, but the MVLA was at the table, so I felt comfortable reaching
Okay.
out to them. They're
Mhm.
not going to be like,
Who are you?
"Who's this
Yeah.
person?"
And what do you
Next year
want?
we get
Yeah.
tried.
Yeah, next year we'll get all
we'll
of
grow it. I'm
all three of
sure
us.
over time. No problem.
Great.
All right. Before I kick off the organizational meeting, Jose, I believe you have something you want to say.
Yes, I wanted to thank each and every single board member for having been part of this wonderful experience, and the executive team, along with Dr. Rudolph and the community as a whole. So 2 years ago, when I was appointed, it was a very different board. It was a very different situation as a whole. But I like to think that within the last 2 years, we immediately took on challenging issues, and we've made progress. During this 1 year that we've just wrapped up, and a new president will take over, we had TTO. We learned from that experience. We came up with a pilot process examination, right? A way of doing things to vet the pilots. We had community engagement that way and district input. But then we also had the opportunity to figure out how are these issues that the board takes on and the superintendent looked at by teachers and understood by the community. And moving forward, what we learned was that there's an ebb and flow to all of this, right? That sharing more information is always better and helpful, and consensus building is always a plus. And for the most part, we've always done that while we've had Superintendent Rudolph here. I can say that to that for sure. It started with the strategic plan, and after the DQR analysis, and afterwards with TTO, we made some edits on that. But what we ended up doing was also taking on issues that were controversial, like that or the sex ed program, and the different perspectives we had on that as well. Then we also had to take on the parcel tax and work together as a team to get that going and engage the community to help us out to reestablish the relationship and the partnership for future monies to help the district evolve even further. And not only that, but then we also had to take on boundaries, and which is also a hot and heavy topic, right? Different perspectives, different opinions. But in the end, when you look at that meeting, and I was telling Dr. Rudolph this, though we all agreed or disagreed, it was very respectful. You didn't have any shouting matches. You didn't have anyone pointing a finger saying, using rude words or what have you, or getting really animated and angry with one another. And the interaction we had with the community was positive. They felt empowered to be able to share their perspectives. We all had the ability to share our own and stand by our positions. But in the end, we worked together as a team to approve what that decision would be in the end in the best interest of the district at that time and move on. And so having said all that, I'd like to think that going from 2 years ago when I first went to the conference down in San Diego and not having a get together with anyone basically, on our board, to now having that camaraderie and the engagement, not only between the board members themselves, but also the superintendent, we've come a long way. And I'm proud of that because I think that with your help, and this is what things can happen when we work together as a team. There's always strength in numbers. I love that saying, but the reality is you have to buy into that. If you don't buy into that, it can get to be problematic. And because of that, I would challenge the executive team on certain things as well. And they've faced the challenge, and now the presentations are even a higher level. Anytime a public member sees the agenda and looks at the presentations, they get the who, what, when, where, and why. If it's not answered there, then they have the ability to come to the district at the meetings to ask or to send us an email. But to have that engagement now and to have that information at a higher level emboldens the district to achieve new heights. It challenges us to just not accept the status quo, and it enables us to think about the future differently as a team, always working for the best interest of the students. So having said that, I want to thank you so much for having supported me in this position. I wish whoever is the next president as much success, if not even more. And I want to continue working as a team because I see us going in the right direction. And I'm very proud to have been your president this past year. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Thank you, Jose.
All right, and with that said, I get to take over. Just one footnote real quick. Even though the sound isn't working through our mics, it is picking up on the video. So as long
You
as you
think the
speak
mics
loud-
work, but the speakers here don't work?
Is that what it is? So they can hear it? Okay, great.
Okay, so we should still keep speaking into the mics as usual.
Okay, great. All right. Well, it is my time to call to order the organizational meeting.
Dr. Rudolph, I'm so sorry. Trustees, I'm so sorry. I just saw my wife.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Can I just quickly, Shannon, we're at the stage where we're going to pass the baton. So I just want to quickly say, I want to thank you, Elena and Gracie, for having been there for me, because we've had a lot of meetings between Dr. Rudolph and myself on the fly, scheduled, impromptu, on the weekends, on weeknights, on holidays. It was a lot of work, and I couldn't have done this without your support, and I thank you so much for being there for me. Thank you. Thank you, trustees. Thank you, Dr. Rudolph.
He's like, you feel like a new man.
It's like I just dropped the mic. I want to go. But I have to stay here. But I just,
Yeah, I would like to add item G, the 30% raise that all employees are going to get.
Yeah. Robert.
We still have to approve the agenda, you know.
Yeah, except for Robert.
Didn't we?
Apparently he's opposed
Well,
to it.
Look
All
at
right,
VC.
So I am going to call to order the organizational meeting. Roll call, please.
Jose Gutierrez Jr.,
Greg Coladonato.
Laura Blakely.
Tamara Wilson.
Ellen Wheeler.
All members are accounted for and present. I am looking for an approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been made by trustee Wheeler, second by trustee Coladonato. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. It is now time for elections of officers. We discussed this last time. Therefore, since we know, we will start off with president. We have two trustees who are going, trustee Blakely and trustee Coladonato. I will simply go in alphabetical order because we can't use a secret ballot.
I'd like to make a comment.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Okay. So for anybody who hasn't been watching the board a lot over the last few years, 2012 and before, we had a pretty collegial board. the different board members shared the different duties of being the board president and board vice president and clerk. They equally shared all the different assignments and so forth. And all the work that President Gutierrez was talking about, that was shared. 2013 to 2016 was different than that, okay? It was like Trustee Wheeler just said, explosions were happening or fireworks, what were those? And so not collegial. There was a censure of one of the trustees, another trustee resigned, and this required abnormal procedures. Trustee Wheeler filled in for half of Trustee Chang's term, finished out the rest of his term and had a term, and things were all kind of up in the air. But as President Gutierrez just described, 2017 has not been like that. I think that we're back to being a normal collegial board where things are shared. We try to share the different offices, share the different responsibilities, and so forth. President Gutierrez mentioned some of the things that you learn when you're board president, which I've heard. I've heard this. You work closely with the superintendent that year, develop a closer relationship with him or her, get involved in how agendas are put together. You represent the board to maybe the media or to the public, and you answer emails from the community. All these make someone who's board president a better board president. They learn, or a better trustee. They learn how to be a trustee a little better by seeing another side to the role. So this reminded me of something else that I experienced this week. I volunteered in my fifth graders classroom. They have a class president as well. That person, they serve for 1 week. They read the morning message. They get to be first in line, all the lines. They dismiss tables for recess, and they get their computer first. So guess how they pick who's going to be president? They do not have elections. They do not have campaign speeches or based it on popularity or even who's best at doing that job. They pull popsicle sticks and everybody gets a turn. So even if I thought Jose, bringing it back to our board, even if I thought Jose was the best president we'd ever have and ever would have, I wouldn't keep reelecting him and deprive Laura and Tamara and myself the chance to ever see what it's like to be board president. I'd rather everyone get a chance. So there was a time during the 2013 to 2016 years when principals and parents would tell us they didn't even want to bring their students to board meetings because of the behavior that the board exhibited, and they were embarrassed and so forth. I'd advocate that the board demonstrate that we're over the years of kind of abnormal procedures and unusual circumstances by going back to the normal way of doing things, which is all the trustees support each other, all trying out all the different roles in turn. I'd like to see Laura and Tamara and myself all get a chance to be board president. And so I think that the best way to, in Laura's words from her earlier recap of the conference, pull the board together. I think the best way to pull the board together would be to go back to some sort of normal, predictable way of sharing things as opposed to some other way based on positioning and factions or some other thing. I think this would engender goodwill, use another of Laura's phrases, to not play favorites or do something along those lines, go back to the normal way of doing this. That's all.
So I'd like to say something now also, and partly in response to what you just said and partly in response to what this meeting is about. People who know me know that I've never been a regular order kind of person. And I think it's a strength of our district that we don't go by black and white rules. So I appreciate structure and suggestion of structure, but I don't like a requirement that things just go by structure. So specifically, and you mentioned the last 3 years, it was, kind of iffy about who was going to be an officer and when, and all those kinds of things.
And we're back.
So here we are, we're back. And now we're trying to get back to some semblance of regular order. But I don't think, just like, I don't believe, just like what I was saying, I don't think that means we go lockstep, clerk, vice president, president, clerk, vice president, president. I have always liked it about our board that we didn't do that. I think everyone on this board would be a good president, and I'd like them all to be president sometime. Now to get to the business of tonight's meeting. One thing our board does and did last week that other boards that I know of do not is discuss ahead of time who is interested in being considered for office. So we're able to have a little bit of a discussion and think about these important offices before just, slam bam into the meeting. So I have thought a lot about the prepared remarks that Laura Blakely made 2 weeks ago. And I thought they made sense. When she was talking about, there it says off again. When she was talking about storming and norming and her experience in her professional life with running meetings, I thought that seemed like the right approach at this time. So that gets back to, we shouldn't just go, the same order every time. I just like I said last year, I thought Jose was the right person at the right time to be president, and I think you have been the right person at the right time. I think Laura's the right person at the right time this year. And I will even say, I'll tie it up, if you run for re-election, Greg, and you win, I think it would be elegant that you would be likely president in the year that we open up a school over in the Slater neighborhood, because that's how you came to prominence in our community, because you were working to open a school over there. So not only would I like Laura to become our new president, I would like you to be our president the year that we opened up a school over there. So those are two reasons, two rationales that come to the same conclusion, which is I would like to move to have Laura Blakely be the next president.
Now, what do we call you? I guess we call you superintendent. You said we were going to go down the line. Do we do
No, I
motions
think
and all
you
that
said
sort of
you
stuff,
were
or do you
gonna
just
just
go down and
alphabetical.
say names? Or what?
You now, I mean, technically, you now have a motion on the floor. So,
But you were going to operate a different.
But there's no,
Protocol.
yeah, well,
there's no
because,
second. There was no second so far.
because you all had already discussed it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess,
So-
I'm so sorry.
I was simply just going to call for a vote.
Yeah.
And I was just going to
Let's
say
do it.
each trustee's name.
Right.
And go from there.
Let's do that.
We raise hands or?
Well, go
We
down
can
the aisle.
Go
It's
down the
easier
aisle,
that way.
starting with Ellen first.
We can just, you want to go down now?
Yeah.
Sure.
I vote for Laura Blakely.
I vote for Laura Blakely. I vote for Laura Blakely.
I vote for Laura Blakely.
I'll vote for Greg Caldonado.
All right. Ms. passes 4-1 for Laura Blakely, Vice President.
I think at this point, the gavel gets turned over to the president.
You don't have to do that.
If you want to continue this part of the meeting.
The power
Jeez,
shifts.
Soup. I mean, look what happened, man. How you like me now, right?
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, Vice President and Clerk.
Right. So how do I open the motion for, I'm not sure,
I
did we
thought you were
discuss?
ready to be president.
You're-
I know.
I would be the.
You're already in election of officers, so all you
Okay.
have to do is call for it.
So I would call for nominees for vice president.
I like to throw my name out there for vice president.
You?
Sure, me. It's not president.
Having said what I just did, I would like to nominate Greg Caldonado as vice president.
I'll second that.
Are you comfortable with that though, Greg? That's the thing. You have to,
How could I not be comfortable with that?
I'm just wondering.
You've
Hmm.
had the
They
position
could
for
work on the
so long.
shared
I'm pretty good at
duties.
it.
They
Yes,
could work
you
on
are.
the shared
Yeah. I was
duties.
good
that
at it
we
last
talked
year, right?
about,
Heck, you
so-
were.
Okay. I'm
That's why I voted
yeah,
for you.
sure, sure.
All
That'd be
right.
Excellent.
Okay. So let's vote for,
Okay, so all in favor of Greg Caldonato for vice president?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations, Greg.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, President
And,
Blakely.
and now
And now do we
clerk,
have a motion for,
And you have to announce the vote.
oh, I announced the vote was 5-0 in favor of Greg Caldonato for president, vice president. It's going to take a little getting used to.
Yeah.
Now, do I have, is anyone interested, do we have a motion for clerk?
I have a motion to nominate Madam Honorable Trustee
Wilson.
Cameron Wilson
There it is.
for the position of clerk.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
And Tamara Wilson, congratulations. You are a clerk with a 5-0 vote.
Thank you.
all right, next you have to approve the board meeting minutes for 2018-19. Or the meeting schedule, the calendar.
Do we have a motion to approve the calendar for the 2018?
I move to
19.
approve the 2018-2019 regular board meeting calendar as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0.
Can I make a procedural comment? You always have to ask, are there, is there anyone opposed?
Thank you. I welcomely, or I'm very glad for coaching. Now, do we have a motion for the board representative assignments? And I believe,
I think we discussed amongst ourselves.
okay, and I believe the prior year's assignments were included in the board package, if anybody wants to take a look. So if people are interested in particular ones, do we just go through the list?
Yeah, or sure, why not? I mean, I'll throw my 2 cents worth on this one because of my hectic schedule, my odd schedule. I wouldn't mind doing MVEF if I could, and stay with DLAC if possible. Unless someone else wants to do DLAC, no problem.
Do we have the list somewhere nearby?
Yeah, I'm just trying to pull it up.
I've
I'm
got
sorry.
on the laptop here. So
Do you know
we
what
have
page it's on?
Citizens Oversight Committee.
Do you have the page number there? by any chance?
Let's list off the whole thing.
Yeah,
and
so,
put
right,
names down.
okay, so
It's not popping out. I didn't download it.
it's on page 13 of the PDF.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have the Citizens Oversight Committee for Measure G. I'll just list them off, and then we have the County Committee on District Organizations.
That's normally the president.
So that's you.
Okay. We have the District Advisory Committee. We have the District English Language Advisory Committee. We have Mountain View Educational Foundation. We have the Parcel Tax Oversight Advisory Committee. We have PTA Council, and we have the Santa Clara County School Boards Association. So do we want to go through the list, or do people just want to say what they're interested in?
I'm wondering maybe would an approach be to say we're happy where you're at, and then if obviously you have to switch to the president role here,
Right?
just for brevity, or
That's fine with me.
I'm happy with the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee, so where I'm at.
Does anybody other than Trustee Gutierrez want to switch assignments from their current assignments?
Oh, you're right, Madam Blakely, because here, this one's outdated. It says MVF, it's got me, when it's really you. Right.
Right, we informally
Right.
switched that.
But would you like to continue with that, or do you, because that's schedule's
Well,
going to be a
I
little.
am very fond of MVF,
Yeah.
but if you want to do it, that's fine. Having been a former president, it's an organization near and dear to my heart, but it will continue, it will remain so whether or not I'm the board observer.
Okay,
If you want to take that one, so,
yeah, sure,
okay.
if possible, please.
So Trustee Gutierrez is going to take MVF.
So you're getting these, Kathy? Okay.
Okay. Trustee Gutierrez is going to take MVF. I should be going down in order. I
Sure,
apologize.
I'm sorry.
So the Citizens Oversight Committee, you said that's the one that's usually,
No, the second one. This is the president.
okay. Oh, it's Measure G. I'm sorry. The Measure G Citizens Oversight Committee. Is anyone interested in that other than myself? I think it just meets quarterly. Okay, well, do you want to do that one, Greg? Are you,
I'm happy with the way the list is.
Okay.
Do you mind continuing or
No.
would you like to?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll continue. Okay, so we're basically leaving it as is, with the exception of Trustee Gutierrez is going to take over for MVF, which is actually what it says here. And I will be added for the County Committee on District Organization. Okay.
Okay.
And then
and
it's-
I'll mention, we've done, when it says County Committee on District Organization as needed, and it's the president, technically that is so, and in practice, we've often had that be a discussion item. I know that a lot of boards around the county have that be a discussion item. So, you can decide later on how you want to deal with that.
okay. I would welcome some advice and more information because I'm not familiar with that committee. So would the
That's
appropriate
one
time
that
to
I just got on.
Yes, you would interact with Madam President Wheeler.
would the appropriate time? Okay, so I can ask you about it. Okay, and then we can. I'm happy to offer it up for discussion.
Mhm.
So at a future meeting.
Okay.
All right.
So then I want to ask, Greg, are you still willing and able to come to PTA council?
Well, you want to be the name there?
Well, I go to those meetings anyway.
True.
So,
You want to switch these two?
no, because I would like to remain our representatives to the Santa Clara County School Board Association.
Yes. Wednesday mornings work for me.
They do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I would just encourage the trustees that if over
Right.
time your schedules change or you have more interest in a particular committee or want to shift, that you just bring that up at a meeting and we'll revise accordingly.
Right, and also our practice also is if we know we can't attend, we can send a message out to the others and ask someone else to, cover for us.
That sounds like a good solution as well. And I note that the list also includes the challenge team for opportunities for community involvement. And I think Trustee Caldonado, Trustee Wheeler, and I have been attending that, but I think that's open for
Yeah.
everybody to attend. And I get a lot out of those meetings, even though they start at 7 a.m. So
Get breakfast.
That's part of it.
if you get there before 7:05. Okay, moving along. The next item on the agenda is the personnel report. And
Consent agenda?
No,
Oh, I'm
consent
sorry,
agenda.
I'm looking.
This
I'm
happens
looking
to
at the
everybody,
wrong-
I will
Come
tell
on,
you that.
Blake, please.
We will all
Okay.
be there.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, with the
As
modification
revised?
as revised. Yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Okay, now it's time for communications. Are there any members of employee organizations that wish to speak this evening? How about are there district committees? Are there any members of district committees that wish to make a report this evening? Superintendent Rudolph, do you have a report for us?
No report.
Okay, we're moving right along here this evening. Now it's the time for community comments. This is the time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board and administration welcome this opportunity to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agenda items. Speakers are requested to complete a speaker card and state their name for the record. If there are additional comments after 10 minutes have elapsed, this item may be continued after all the action and discussion items are completed. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak this evening? Okay, then let's move on to the review and action. The first item on the review and action agenda is the 2017-18 first interim budget report. Take it
evening.
away.
Hi, so I'm here tonight to present the 2017-2018 first interim budget report. Director Liu, who is our Director of Fiscal Services, is currently on vacation in Taiwan, so she cannot be here this evening. So I will jump right into it. Just as a reminder for the budget process for us as a school district, the district is required twice each year to certify the budget. We adopt the budget in June for the following year, and then twice each year we come as interim budgets. First interim is July to October 31st, which is required to be adopted by December 15th, which is what we're doing tonight. And then we come back in March for the second interim, and then there's the unaudited actual in September. And just as a reminder, our goal, our budget and our expenditures and revenues are aligned with the strategic plan 2021. And for goal 5 is resource stewardship is the budget. Strategy 5.1, staff will utilize various resources to support the financial and facilities and tech goals for the district. Our goal is to provide access for resources that are in a fiscally responsible manner. And of course, the big action for us as part of the strategic plan is that we will maintain a balanced general fund, which we will talk about in a little bit. So as a reminder to the community, we have both unrestricted and restricted categories. Unrestricted revenues and expenditures are the discretionary funding that we get from, some we get from the state. For the most of our discretionary money, our unrestricted money is our property taxes, the LCFF sources that come in, which is property taxes for us as a community funded school district. And that money is used for the most part, used for ongoing expenditures, those special one-time shortfalls that go into typically for special ed. Fund 12, which is preschool, and Fund 13, which is food service, to make those contributions. Restricted revenues and expenditures are the non-discretionary revenue used for specific expenditures. Special ed usually comes to mind. The federal programs, Title I, Title III. And then just a reminder about reserves. Reserves are the unrestricted ending balance in Fund 1, used for economic uncertainty and for the most part, one-time expenditures. So we'll jump right into the numbers. And feel free to ask questions. Fund 1, General Fund, this is just the first interim. So for the 2017-2018 school year, this is just a reminder from kind of where we were. Beginning balance in July 1, 2017, we have both unrestricted and, I went too far, sorry. Unrestricted and restricted programs, and then combined. We did pretty well for 17-18 for first interim. Unrestricted as a first interim, we actually are in the positive. We are in the black for as a net increase for unrestricted. Ending the right now project of just over $23 million. Restricted programs, there is a deficit of essentially 2.8. And to explain that in just a moment, I'll come forward to that. And then of course, combined, we still have over the course of the year, looking at a $2 million deficit in spending for the general fund. So if I jump into how we got from there to here, from adopted back in June to first interim. So we have in revenues for the district, we increased from adopted to first interim just over $5.5 million in revenues. Some of those major changes, these are the big ticket items. Our assessed valuation of what we adopted in June, we adopted a assessed valuation growth, property tax growth for us at 7%. The final number came in at 11.65, which was 11.65 is higher than 7. So for us, there's a net increase in dollars. And it turned out to be just over $2 million of ongoing revenue for the district. That was a big difference. Also, parcel tax, we've always budgeted $2.8 million. When Measure B passed and we went to a flat tax of $191 per parcel, and as we got through the summer with a number of parcels, the parcels that were exempt, then didn't become exempt because they were new parcels. We actually have a new number right at 2.9 and 2.97. So we're about $162,000 more for the 17-18 school year in parcel tax than we were in previous years. So that's a bump. At the last board meeting, we presented the idea of transferring excess lease revenue out of Fund 40 to Fund 1. The board was in agreement to that. Technically, the board has not taken action on that, but well, technically you actually just did in consent. So, but we went ahead and did it for the first interim, and that was $1.4 million that we transferred from Fund 40 to Fund 1, which helped the overall budget. Shoreline made a huge difference in the 17-18 school year. The guarantee for Shoreline is $2.874 million. That's the guarantee that we get. For the 17-18 school year, it's just over $4 million that we're going to receive from Shoreline funding. So that's an increase of, just over $1 million as well. And then typical state fashion, we're required to adopt our budget. The state adopts their budget. And at the very end, when the state adopted the budget for the 17-18 school year, there was one-time discretionary funding that they agreed to. And for us as a school district, it was just over about $730,000. When we adopted the budget in June, it didn't exist. Well, so now at first interim, we show that. So those are big changes that came to the first interim for the revenue side, just over $5.5 million. Expenditures went along kind of the same way. So what we adopted in June versus what we are in first interim is just over $4.5 million. And some of the major changes, the biggest one was the salary increases. MVA is settled, management settled. MVA, if you recall the salary schedule for MVA, the top half of the salary schedule, for lack of a better terminology, got a 7% increase. And the bottom half of the salary schedule got a 5% increase. We also collapsed the salary schedule from 7 columns to 5. That total cost was about 6.7%. And that's what management also got, was the 6.7%. Those two, which are confirmed and done. But we also have offered CSEA 6.7%. That's the offer on the table. So we know we're going to pay at least 6.7% for CSEA regardless of the settlement, or hopefully when things are ratified in the agreement. So for us, what we went ahead and did in first interim, good resource stewardship for fiscal management. We went ahead and budgeted that 6.7 increase for CSEA. So that you'll see the salary increases for 17-18 is just over $3 million. That's included. We also budgeted the expenses for the carryover donations account. Our school sites district carried over a chunk of cash from donations from PTA, school sites. So we budgeted those expenditures, so you'll see that jump. English learner assessment, we were doing the CELT test in the fall. The state has now come up with a new test, the LPAC, the assessment for students. Because it's our first year in the pilot, the district is actually going to pay. So it's the second test that we're going to do this spring. And that's a $120,000 cost that we're going to have to pay. So this year we pay it twice, and then of course future years we only have to pay it once, but that's an added increase over the adopted budget. And then CHAC and counseling, the final CHAC contract came in after we adopted the budget, and that was an increase as well. So if we look at the multi-year projection, 16-17, we actually finished the year in the black, which was great. You see 17-18, that net increase and decrease on that line. We were just about $2 million of deficit spending. And then as you go out for the 18-19, 19-20 school years, you'll see deficits. In the 18-19 school year, it's just over $4.5 million. And then in the 19-20 school year, it drops to just under $3 million, 2.8. One of the things that we've discussed is a reserve policy. And the strategic plan says we operate a balanced general fund. And one of the conversations, well, actually several of the conversations the superintendent and I have had is, what is the definition of a balanced general fund? It will be very hard for us to have a kind of a not deficit spending every year and meet our goals, but we still maintain a very healthy reserve in the third year. So one of the things that we're toying with, and which we'll bring back at the January 4th board meeting for the board's consideration, is to look at, we can still deficit spend, provided that in the third year, we are in that 17 to 20% reserve level. So if we know there's a big expense coming, we know some things, we can plan for it, we can spend it, we can dip into our reserves, provided that in that third year, and like in this case right now, in that 19-20 school year, our reserve level is in that 17 to 20% level. And that's what we're looking for. We have, just for the board's edification, in the 18-19, 19-20 school year, Slater has been fully staffed. We have some staff coming online in the 18-19 school year to prepare for the opening. In the 19-20 school year, the rest of Slater is there. We're staffing Slater just like we do any of the other elementary schools. We use Montaloma as the kind of the base school. So I don't know why we just picked it, but a principal, a custodian, a secretary, a clerk, an instructional coach, the SCEF, all the positions that we have currently at an elementary school, we put at Slater as well. And so they're budgeted. So those show up in the 18-19, 19-20 school years. We did get pretty conservative in the assessed valuation growth. Last year we had double digits in 12%. In the 17-18, we budgeted 7%, but it was 11.65%. We are about 2 percentage points below right now where we were last year. Last year's AV growth at this time was 3.66%. Right now, this year, we're at 1.4. So doing some math, which is great, we could, on average, if you look over the last 3 years, we could get back up to those double digits again by the end of the school year for the 18-19 school year. But we're off to a very slow start for the 17-18 school year AV growth, assessed valuation growth for the 18-19 year. So we've taken more of a conservative approach for budgeting for assessed valuation growth. And so in the 18-19 school year, it's 5%. And in the 19-20 school year, it's 3%. Those seem really low compared to where we've been for the last few years, but we would rather be conservative now, especially with the reserves that we have, and have those numbers and meet them or exceed them versus get to the spring, know those numbers are not coming, and now we're start looking at reductions. Wait. So some impacts to the budget. There's some possible impacts. Of course, strategic plan 2021 requires that we maintain a balanced general fund. We've talked about the idea of what a balanced general fund will look like, and we'll bring that for the January 4th for board discussion. We have looked at the continued assessed valuation growth. It's slowing, but it's still positive, and that makes nice. Any positive growth that we have is positive revenue coming into the school district. Another positive is that we have a very healthy reserve level. And of course, reserves are one-time money, and one-time expenditures should be looked at. Ongoing expenditures in your reserve is not necessarily something that we would want to do. Negative impact, developer fees are slowing. I write that it's the fact that we're off to a good start, but last year was a really big year. It was a banner year for developer fees. I wouldn't want anyone to think that we're going to have another $2 million developer fee year. It would be great if it happened, but we're not on track where we were for last year. But there was a huge developer fee revenue coming in the spring last year. There were a couple of big months that were $500,000-$600,000 each. The other one is that we're relying on lease revenue for COP payment. It's not awful. Our long-term leases are pretty solid. Google and German School are going to stay there for a while, so it's pretty solid. But I would be remiss if we didn't mention that we're paying some bills on lease revenue. Contracted services are right now at 15% for our school district. It's not awful. There are contracted services that we have to pay for, and there are things that we just have to buy. We don't have in-house services. We have to buy outside. Also, consultants that we have. I just was reviewing a couple of contracts that we're bringing in, programs at school sites. Those are contracted services as well. But we are going to be looking at ways to reduce that. You'll see at the audit presentation from the auditor in January, we did receive an audit finding because we were not able to achieve the 60% ratio, where we spend 60% of our money directly in the classroom. We are at 56% and some change. So that's something that we're going to have to work on for this school year for the future. And then, of course, one of the things that's going to be a challenge, if we stay with a balanced general fund, means that we have zero deficit each year with the reserves that we have. It might be a challenge for us. Both positive and negative. It could be we just went through open enrollment in November. Sometimes it's a banner year and sometimes it's not. Sometimes we have very expensive health benefits change. People leave. The employee who was getting full family, who could be at $25,000, $28,000 contribution from the district, departs, and the new employee coming in is single and only has single insurance, and so it's a savings to the district. The opposite can be true as well. Now, a lot of people have become married and have spouses and have children, and now they have family, and so that expense. So you'll see that actually at second interim. So it could be a positive or negative, we're not sure. Slater I put as both positive and negative both for 19. It's great that we're opening a new school. We have a new school on that side of town, but a negative, of course, it's a huge expense that's coming to the district of ongoing. The kids don't cost anything. It's the stuff that we're going to have there to support them. Another principal, another secretary, the support staff. And then, of course, pending revenue limit discussions and action, it depends on where we go. 17 to 20%. Do we live with that? Do we not? Do we stay with it? Do we want to have a balanced general fund, meaning that we do zero deficit spending? We're not sure where that is. Then, of course, next steps for us. Tonight we have the discussion and questions for first interim. Staff recommends that we approve the first interim as presented, and for board action. The next thing for us is that on January 4th, we'll come back and have that reserve conversation with the board. On January 18th, I will present the governor's budget. because he will have presented the 18-19 state budget by then. And then we're looking at the February 3rd board retreat to start looking at the discussing staff compensation across the district. And then, of course, the second interim is in March. That's that.
Thank you, Dr. Clark.
Thanks.
Trustees, do you have any questions for Dr. Clark or other staff? Trustee Gutierrez?
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Clark, help me out here. So I think last year we had talked about allocating 1.2 for SEAL, but being that we're not going to use that, I didn't see here where that money was allocated. I'm not sure if this is the time where we can revise and remove that 1.2 for that said suggested program. How does that work?
Oh, that's already gone.
That's already gone?
Yeah.
Okay.
We took that out.
All right, good.
But-
Thank you.
but
As long as I just want
PSYOP's
to
in
confirm
there.
that. Yes, yes.
PSYOP's in, SEAL's out.
Sounds good.
And that was glorious to the ending balance.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Clark, did you say we're getting $4 million in shoreline funds this year?
Correct.
Because it's been like 3 million every year prior to now, or around that. Did it? It jumped 1.14 million.
It jumped 1.4 because we budget 2.8.
Okay,
We
but it's
budget
been like
'cause that's-
2.9-ish or something, right? 2.9 something or 2.8 something.
2.874 is the minimum we get. This last year, we got a little over 3 million. This 17-18 school year, the superintendent went to the JP meeting. It was $1 million more than what we got last year. So the 1.4 jump is going from what we budget to what we were actually getting. Last year, we got over $3 million from JPA. It was about $1 million jump for us.
Does that imply that the property tax value of North Bay Shore is up 33% in a year? Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Trustee Wheeler?
So then what are we using that extra money for?
There's a deficit.
Thank you, Dr. Clark.
I can actually,
One more question.
it's over there, but I can actually show you what the other items were. We shifted shoreline. So you want And as part of the board packet tonight, also it's what I call the user-friendly budget. I hope it's user-friendly for the community itself, but there's the other attachment as part of the PowerPoint. And if you go through, it lists each revenue and expenditure. Every dollar that we make or receive, contribute, and spend is in that document. And not to mention the 200-page SACS document from the state, if you want to go through that as well. But Shoreline is listed out at the very, very end. And it shows us spending, actually it shows us spending $5.4 million, which is a lot more because we had carryover from last year. We didn't spend all of the Shoreline money last year. So we had carryover into the Shoreline account. And this year budgeting 2.874 million and then getting $4 million made it even more difficult to spend. So we had conversations internally and we have moved more expenses, the same categories of expenses, but all of them to the Shoreline account. Instructional coaching is a good example. We've moved all the coaches over to the Shoreline account, which is $1.7 million for our instructional coaches at our schools. But essentially, it's the same category. A lot of the sciences, the after-school program, technology services, et cetera.
And am I correct that now we have 6 full-time employees at each elementary school, or at the median? You listed off all the people you're hiring at Slater. It sounded like 6 full-time employees. Is that correct or no? Principal, secretary, clerk, custodian, instructional coach, SCEF. There's 6 full-time employees at every elementary school has those 6 roles dedicated to them 100% of the day.
Right.
I didn't remember. I don't think we used to have 6 people at every single school. Yeah.
So if you look at it's
Didn't
like
have
6
SCEFs,
people, but it's
didn't
not
have-
quite. So principal's full-time.
Yeah.
Secretary's full-time. The clerk can be full-time. It depends. It depends on the enrollment. Some are full-time, some are 7 hours, some are 6 hours. It just depends on the enrollment. So those are your 3. And then you add in the SCEF, and that depends. And I think those guys are all full-time if memory serves. And then you start to add in the day custodian, the night custodian, and the instructional coach that goes with it. And the instructional coach is 1 per school. So we're adding 1 for Slater.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Do any members of the community wish to make a comment on the budget or the first interim budget report? Trustees?
I move that we approve the presented 2017-2018 first interim budget report as presented.
Second.
Any further comments? Okay. Can I have a vote on the 2017-18 first interim budget report? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Clark. The next item on the agenda is approval to advertise for bid Measure G Slater Elementary School site work.
Yes, we'd like to advertise for the project as a
Your name, please?
I'm
Kevin
sorry.
Sanders, Director of Capital Projects.
I should have
Yes, so
done
we'd
that.
like to
Thank
advertise
you.
for that project. Yes, that is correct. Are there any questions on that?
Trustees, do you have any questions?
Nope.
Um, do any members of the community wish to speak on this topic?
Nope.
Trustees, do you have any comments on the topic?
Nope.
Nope.
Can I have a motion to approve to advertise for bid Measure G Slater Elementary School site work project?
Sure. I make the motion that the Board of Trustees approve bidding the Slater Elementary School site work project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the calendar for the 2018-19 school year. Ms. Geisels?
Good evening. As you know, the school calendar committee, the school calendar is a negotiated item under our collective bargaining agreement. So we formed a calendar committee, which was composed of our representatives from our Mountain View Educators Education Association and district representatives, and we developed the 18-19 calendar. After that, we reviewed it with the support and the input of our district leadership team. And after that, we made sure, most especially, that it was aligned to the Mountain View Los Altos High School District's calendar. So I present before you our 18-19 school year calendar for your approval.
Trustees, do you have any questions about the calendar? Would any members of the community like to comment on the calendar? Trustees, do you have any comments on the calendar? I have one. I am so glad
Yes.
that our district is aligning with the high school district. My family was part of the days when one kid had one set of vacations and another kid had another. So I'm really glad. I think we started this about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes.
And I bring it.
Yes.
Thank you.
As
know-
a parent of a Mountain View High School student and Mountain View Wisconsin elementary school students, I do appreciate that we can take vacations.
Great. Do we have a motion to approve the calendar for the 2018-19 school year?
Move to
Move to
approve?
approve the calendar. Okay, you can have it.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
And President Blakely, it's useful for the record if you say who made the motion and who seconded.
Thank you. I believe that trustee Wilson? Wheeler.
Wilson.
moved.
No.
Wilson.
You guys are trying to confuse me.
Yeah.
Trustee Wilson moved and trustee Coladinato seconded that motion. Thank you, Madam Wheeler. The next item on the agenda is board policy number 6161.1, selection and evaluation of instructional materials.
Yes, good evening. So this is a regular policy and we have some updates from CSBA and it's a very minor update. It's really an update that's replacing language that was there with the old academic performance index. So what we're asking tonight is that you approve the policy at first reading as presented.
Trustees, does anyone have any questions about the policy? Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on board policy 6161.1, selection and evaluation of instructional materials. Trustees, any comments? Do we have a motion?
I move that the board approve board policy number 6161, selection and evaluation of instructional materials at first reading as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion passes unanimous. The motion made by trustee Gutierrez and seconded by trustee Wheeler passes unanimously. Okay, and then the next item was moved from consent to review and action, and it is resolution number 1662.12/17, finding a board concerning absence of trustee Ellen Wheeler. Do any trustees have any questions about this motion, this resolution?
What was it about again?
Trustee Wheeler had to miss a part.
There was a specially called meeting that had been non-agendized, and because it was non-agendized, I had planned on something else. So I attended that something else instead of the specially called meeting.
I've personally stated at this dais that I oppose spending board time, district time on reimbursing somebody for missing a meeting. I've missed meetings and I just suck it up. And I oppose this sort of thing in general. We shouldn't waste time on it.
So I'll add to my comment and say that, and I agree with you that I don't like spending time in a meeting for this. School board members are the only people in the entire district who do not get any personal leave or sick leave. And I think that is a travesty. And I think that, one, we should have that. And if we don't, then an occasional item like this is the next best thing.
I guess we're having comments as opposed to questions, but were there any questions about this that haven't been raised yet? Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? Trustees, do you have any further comment on this item? Can I have a motion to approve the resolution 1662.12/17, finding a board concerning absence of trustee Wheeler at a special meeting that hadn't been previously agendized?
I move that the board approve resolution number 1662.12/27, finding of the board concerning the absence of trustee Ellen Wheeler as presented.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
The motion passes 3-2. The motion made by trustee Gutierrez and seconded by myself passes 3-2.
And while we're on this agenda item, trustee Wilson, will you explain why you voted no?
What's the dollar amount on this?
60 something.
I kind of concur with trustee Coldonato about the time frame of it. I've missed meetings and haven't taken this route. I don't know. I just think it's not worth the dollar amount to discuss this.
I called in to the meeting, the last meeting from Newark, New Jersey, that went until 1:30 a.m. East Coast time rather than miss the meeting. If I didn't feel like doing that, I could have left the $60 on the table and I wouldn't have applied for a reimbursement of the money.
We've already voted, but for me, it's a principle that if every other employee in the district gets personal time, then I think trustees should get personal time.
I think we have 9 to 5, 5 days a week personal time. We can do whatever we want with our day, unlike teachers who have to be in the classroom. We only have to come twice a week to an evening meeting. So I think we get plenty of personal time. It adds up to maybe 160 hours during the week where we can do whatever we want with our time. It's just 8 that we have to be at the dais.
I have to use my personal leave from work in order to attend many events for the district. So it's just different perspective. It's not that I disagree with where you're coming from. It's just a different perspective.
Are there any other members of the board that are ready for a short bio break?
Yes.
Oh,
Wait,
yeah.
wait, wait. We only have one thing left for 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'm not gonna wait. I need to go.
You're going one way or the other, whether
Look
we
at all the
break.
water I've drank, man.
Oh,
I mean,
man. I got-
We'll take a
okay,
break
okay.
at the meeting at
Bio break.
7:55 and we'll adjourn again at 8 o'clock.
Thank you.
I was wondering what it was. I mean, sometimes when there's two meetings, it's one half of 252. Did it even say $60 in it?
No, not on the agenda.
It's been in there a bunch of times. Ellen's put that at least 5 times that I can recall. So. And nobody else ever has.
But
My daughter loves those things. Okay, bio break it is.
it is nice and warm in here for once.
Well, and it's warm and then it's like, it seems like it gets cold.
guess I'll wait till 8 since I said 8. Should I wait till 8?
Mm.
So I was going to.
Well, my phone just said 8.
Well, it just said it.
Okay.
Boom. Okay. Okay, it is now 8 o'clock in the meeting of the Mountain View Wisman School District Trustees is reconvened. So the next item for review and discussion on the agenda is the middle school schedule task force update. And Ms. Bauer is going to speak about all the hard work that everybody on the task force has been putting into this. Thank you.
Sure. Happy to be here. And I do have, we have another update tonight. We were hoping to come to you tonight with a recommendation, and we pushed that back to the January 4th meeting based on the feedback we received from staff. When we surveyed staff about our options, we actually got creative and came up with another option that we think actually is going to, that has some really good points to it. So I'm not going to share everything with you. I left everything in the schedule, but we are striving to make sure that all of our students have access to electives. That is the goal of our committee. And so, we did thought exchange. We talked a little bit about that the last time. You could see we had fairly good participation from staff and parents and students. Some of the highlights, remembering that students really wanted home economics and parents wanted STEAM and foreign languages as elective opportunities. Some things about starting later each day, which wasn't really the task of this committee, but is something we can definitely look into. And then talking about facilities, students are interested in reducing their backpacks and having ways to store their materials, and having parents looking for more communication, but also some consistency around having heavy backpacks. So we met again as a task force on November 20th and 27th, and we spent a majority of that time reviewing the staff survey data and discussing some feedback from cabinet and comments and feedback that we received here at the last board meeting. And based on all of that feedback, we did come up with a variation of the 8-period day for consideration. So a little bit about the feedback. So we had 31 staff members from Graham and 17 from Crittenden respond. We gave them a form, asked them to provide us pros and cons for both the 7-period day and the 8-period day, and asked them to give us any other comments they may have. And some themes emerged from that. There was concern that the 7-period schedule would not allow every student a choice elective, and if they were an English learner who also had a learning disability and was in special education, would not allow them to have instructional support. They'd have to have ELD and their elective. And so there's concern about that because we weren't able to come up with yet a way to be creative in that schedule to make sure that all student needs were met. We also, in the 8-period day, there was concerns raised about the number of days a week kids are going to see their teachers. So it's a rotating schedule. It's a block schedule. You have 4 classes every day, and in some weeks, you're only going to see your teacher twice. And that was a concern. A lot of high schools use this schedule, and for older kids, it works really well, but not sure quite how it was going to work for kids that are younger, and how kids were going to retain information and consistency in instruction when they only had 2 days a week to see their teacher. And I think the length of periods also came up as a concern. 90 minutes. Our math classes currently have that, but it's a long stretch for kids. And if you're going to do 90 minutes for every single class every single day, it could get a little bit much. So those were the concerns. So just reminding you, we have our 7-period day. We talked a little bit about the pros and cons, the biggest one being our students with special needs and needing ELD cannot have that support class. We had our 8-period block day where kids were rotating 4 classes a day. Pros and cons here. The big cons coming out about the length of period and how many times we see our kids. So here's what we found. So we actually found what's called a cascading schedule. It's an 8-period schedule. The periods on the short day are 32 minutes. The periods the rest of the time are 58 minutes. And how this works is it's 8 periods, but kids go to 6 classes a day. You drop two classes each day over 4 days, and one day they see all 8. So And we drop one morning class, one afternoon class in the schedule. And this schedule allows teachers to see their kids 4 times a week, which is currently what they see now in their 7-period schedule, and allows for a nicer block of time, 58 minutes as opposed to 98 minutes, which is kind of a compromise. So this is what it would look like. Just generally, you can see the late start day would be all 8 classes, and then you'd have your cascading schedule the rest of the week. And so what we did is we showed you, and I know you've seen this, but you can see kind of, this is just a sample of what it would look like for each student on each day. So late start day, 32-minute periods, we see all of our classes. Day 2, you drop 2. This student could have these classes depending on which classes were dropped. Same thing across the board, each day dropping 2 classes until you've seen all of your teachers 4 times over the week. So there's some pros and cons like any schedule. This schedule allows all students to have a choice elective. It allows all students to have the support they need. If you're an English learner and you have an IEP, you can have a support class, you can have an elective, you have everything you need in the day. It allows students to see their teachers and teachers to see their students 4 days a week. Like the other 2 schedules, it does have a period in it which does allow for additional math, because the way it's scheduled is single math, but the response to instruction block can be used for additional math for students who need it, both acceleration and remediation. And the period's long enough for deeper learning, but not long enough to be fatiguing for students, 90 minutes. And it also provides for 2 preparation periods for teachers, which we think will be really important, especially as we add an additional period, but as we add co-teaching as well. There are some cons. There's going to be an adjustment period. Everybody will have to get used to it and have to remember which 2 periods we drop every day. The nice part is the same, so over time we'll get used to it, and there's ways we can support students to do that. It does in the 8 periods, just like the 8-period AB schedule, some students can have more than 1 elective. It does create a different kind of issue. Now everybody has elective, but some can have more than 1. And then the short periods on Wednesday, that's short. 32 minutes isn't a lot of time. It creates some inconsistency. So one of the things, if we work with or move forward with this schedule, is the task force would recommend that we move the late start day from Wednesday to Monday, because then you start the week with seeing all of your kids. It's a nice way to get started, kick off the week, and get going, and then the rest of the week would be the longer periods. So our next steps. This week, the principals shared the option with the staff, talked to them about the fact that we listened to their feedback and shared this option, and the task force is scheduled to meet again on the 11th, and a recommendation will be coming to you on January 4th. That's where we are.
Thank you, Ms. Bauer. Trustees, does anyone have any questions? Ms. Wheeler?
Yeah, you mentioned difficulty in getting used to the schedule. How are you going to communicate to the students which classes are which day, and to their families?
So we'd have to do that. We can show them generically, okay, each day you'll drop X each period. And then I think what we'll have to do is creatively use their agendas and how we have their agendas printed each year and how to remember that. I think it's just going to be word of mouth. It's going to be conversation, because each student's schedule will be different. So we'll have to practice with them on that first day. Okay, remember, tomorrow you're going to drop these 2 periods, and tomorrow you're going to these classes, and we're just going to have to communicate with both parents and kids.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that I liked your repetitive use of the word communicate. What you're describing to me sounds logical, but it doesn't sound intuitive.
Right.
So I think you're going to need to do lots of communicating, and as you were saying, not just to the kids, and assuming that the kids can communicate to their parents, needs to be a way for parents to know. So I would suggest or imagine this is what you're going to be doing, multiple ways to communicate. So, by phone or by, website or by, computer, lots of different ways instead of just telling kids on their agendas.
Absolutely. I kind of envision something that the kids can take home and have their parents post somewhere by their calendar, which says each day, here's your schedule, fill in which classes you have each day and which ones you don't, so they can look at it. My kids are in high school, but they're on a block schedule, AB day. And so we have a calendar each month which says what day it is, because my kids remember, but we can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think something like that could help. But again, you're right. It's just over communication and supporting both parents and students.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's a great way to go. I actually, in going through this whole process, I remember distinctly being very nervous in middle school because, of course, it's the first time you change classes. That's when those dreams start coming in where you don't make class or the test. Or maybe I'm the only one who has this. But I'm curious. It sounds like, given some background research, that Palo Alto uses some middle schools use a schedule or a cascading schedule, maybe not the 8-period one.
They do
Is
a
that the
seven period. They drop 1 period every day. And we actually experimented, but 7 periods doesn't work for us. 8 does. And then this schedule we found at a middle school in Southern California.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That was my question. Trustee Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam President. So I have a question for you. So in this, I like to update it, which is great. My only question though is, and we had an email and I've had some parent interactions as well asking, when will we know what the start times will be for said proposed schedule so that we can have more or less an idea? So do you have any response to that in terms of proposed start times for the different options?
Right. So the charge of the task force was to come up with the schedule. We are not changing the start time for next year. So we are happy to look into and figure out how to change the start time, because I do think late start is a great thing, but that involves a whole separate group of people. We have to deal with after school sports. We have to deal with transportation. We have to do food service. And those are all things that we haven't done. And I think that's a task of a whole new group of people. And it might be nice to get used to this schedule. I think we kind of dip our toes in the water by moving the late start day to Monday.
Sure.
Kids have a weekend, get to sleep in a little bit before they come to school. But changing the start time is another kind of monumental task.
Okay, well, that helps because now we know what to respond with, right? Which is great. Thank you so much. And the other question I have is the concerns I get from parents and students, the backpack. Will we be able to use lockers? Will that be part of a discussion eventually? Because I have a backpack here for my middle schooler, and she walks from here all the way down to Latham Street.
It's pretty heavy.
Behind Costco.
Was that 30 pounds?
I don't know, man, but feel free to pass it on, but it's heavy. So anything we could try and problem solve to try and figure out what can we do to get the lockers going, I would appreciate that very much, because I know there's a lot of concern about the weight of the backpack and the issues of posture and all that goes with it.
I agree. I think that's definitely something that we can look at. We don't have lockers, but I think there's some creative ways that we can probably work with our teachers to figure out how we can lower the load for our students. We definitely don't want them having back issues at age 12.
Lockers were removed at the start of the construction. And so we didn't have that budgeted in. And so it'll be something that we just need to cost out to see. And then think about what is the feasibility of getting them back in. I don't even know what they looked like, if they were outside or how that looks, but it'll be something that we'll just have to investigate and go from there.
Thank you so much. Those are the questions I have.
Did any other trustees have any questions? Members of the public, does anybody have any questions about this? Any further comments? Ellen?
Yeah, at our last meeting when you were describing the 7 and 8 period days, I said that I liked the 8-period day. And one reason I did is that it established fewer classes every day, so there'd be less homework every night, so with a decrease in levels of stress for students and teachers. It took me a while to get used to what you're describing here, this cascading thing. And I know that, in any one of these block or cascading days, some days are heavy and some days are light anyway. But what I think I'm seeing in this cascading schedule that you were describing to us is a method that philosophy will still be able to be there for students because they will have fewer classes and longer periods of time in between classes before they have to turn in their homework. So I could see the wisdom of doing this schedule.
Are we
Anyone
on
else?
comments now?
Yes.
Okay. I have a comment if you don't mind, Madam President. So I like the idea of moving the late start to Monday. I think
me
that's very
too.
beneficial. It helps out. And I also see the consistency from Tuesday through Friday as an important issue. And that helps out too, to find out what the teachers think. So that's an instance of cooperation I really appreciate with that information that you presented. The one comment I have though is I hadn't expressed my opinion beforehand of what I like, and now I will. I like the 8-period cascading option. I think that would be beneficial, and I think it would fit in well with what we're trying to do. So thank you so much.
If no one else has a comment, I'll make a couple. I like the 8-period cascading schedule too, for a lot of the same reasons. I also really like the fact that the kids won't have hour-and-a-half classes. I think that's tough for teachers. It's tough for kids. It was tough for me in college. It was tough last week when we were at this conference. You start, oh, can I go get another cup of coffee? I need to get up and wiggle around. So I think that was really smart to not try to jam that down the throats of middle schools. And I think it's great that some kids will have 2 electives and then every kid will have at least one. So I just applaud the work. I know it's been a bear and really appreciate all the effort that has gone into this.
Yeah, I'd
Thank
like
you.
to make
Oh.
one more comment, which is, and we've described this and praised you and Dr. Rudolph in a variety of different presentations. I think a reason that this will have success is that you took it through such an involved process instead of, one thing I heard from one person from another school district is, what are you taking so long to do scheduling? I could, make up a schedule in an afternoon and implement it. Our community wants involvement. Our staff members want involvement. The students want involvement. So I think, what's the phrase? Go slow to go fast. That I think that's what we did here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So are there any board updates live? I know some people have submitted them, but we have a little more time this evening. Does anybody want to make live updates? Ellen?
Yeah, I'll make 2 live updates. One is, so I had said in one of my updates, and I say it this week, and I'll say it next time. I've had the opportunity through Silicon Valley Community Foundation, to go see candidates for governor in a small, it's a small dining room. It's smaller than this room. And one of the things that, a selling point that we were told for this is, we don't know who the governor is going to be, but we know that one of the people that you're going to hear is going to be governor. So, we filled the room, and it was a moderated discussion, get Q&A. So I heard Gavin Newsom yesterday. And, as we were all saying, we heard him at the convention. We heard all the major candidates. It was just really impressive to hear him up close. And he wasn't just repeating the same old, campaign pitch that, a lot of politicians do. And then my thing for next week is the last candidate that is going to be presented to us is John Chung. So be able to go hear him next week. And I would like to say, I said it in my written report for the convention, and, I just referenced this, but I want to say it here since we have some time. Not specifically related to being a school board member, just being someone who's interested in the world. I went to hear the dean of Berkeley Law School, Erwin Chemerinsky, who is considered by many people to be the foremost interpreter and scholar of constitutional law, in a conversation with Janet Napolitano, the president of University of California. And the talk was about free speech on campus. And I've heard him speak before. I don't know if any of you others, so not only is he a scholar and a dean, he's also a professor. So he does all this, presenting all this information. And what do you think about this? And here's a hypothetical. And a reason I bring this up is that Dean Chemerinsky and Mike Smith of Lozano Smith both independently made the same point when they were talking about free speech. So Mike Smith was talking about at convention, and Erwin Chemerinsky was talking about Commonwealth Club. And they said that there are all sorts of issues and all sorts of cases that are coming up around social media and the internet, and the law is not prepared to handle them. All of these things are coming so fast, and it's so modern, and we're trying to fit old legal concepts onto these things. And they're basically saying, watch out, because these old tools may not be enough for the new technology. And it's useful to hear that, so one in 2 different sessions from 2 different experts. This is happening around the country and around the world. So if there's an issue that happens in our school district or in our county or in our state, it's not us, it's the modern world. So, I just say this, here we are in the, capital of Silicon Valley, but, these issues are coming up, we're reading about them, and it'll be interesting.
It will. Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments that they'd like to make? Any board updates?
I'll send mine to Kathy.
Okay, as will I. Any items for future agendas? And the future board meeting dates are set out in the agenda. Do I read those out, or do we just note that they're
And
there?
can I make a request, Kathy? I know that we just got a list of the board meeting dates for the school year after this one, but we haven't had a communication of the January to June dates for a while. I had to look at my calendar from like last year to try to figure out what they are. So can you send us a date list of what the rest of our board meeting dates for this school year are?
Thank you. Okay, so the next board meeting will be held on January 4th in this location, and I hope everybody has wonderful holidays. Thank you for coming out tonight. This meeting is adjourned at 8:23.
Earliest time in months.
Yeah,
I think.
I think ever for me.